Why forgiveness feels impossible. Forgiveness is the word stamped across every religion, every pulpit, every family argument that ever ended with the hollow line, "You just need to forgive." Forgiveness is the word that gets weaponized by guilt, dressed up by fear, and preached as if it were a commandment written in stone. But if forgiveness feels impossible, it is not because it is impossible. It's because most of the world has been learning it from the wrong teacher. A Course in Miracles says the ego has its own plan for forgiveness. And that plan is far more widely used than God's. The ego's forgiveness is always conditional. "I'll forgive you, but you better never do it again." "I'll forgive, but only if you grovel." "I'll forgive, but I won't forget." That's not forgiveness. That's bookkeeping. That's a prison made of polished chains. God's forgiveness is not about tallying sins. It's not about reviewing what was done and then magnanimously deciding to pardon it. The Course says to forgive is to overlook. To overlook doesn't mean to excuse. It means to see past. It means to look right over the ego's little stage play and realize nothing happened to truth. The ego tells you forgiveness is impossible because it defines it as condoning the unforgivable. But the Holy Spirit redefines it as remembering what was never real. Call it not sin, but madness, the Course says. For such it was and such it still remains. The miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes the distortion and frees them from prison. The prison was never the event. The prison was the thought about it. The bars were guilt, the chains were grievances, and the warden was the belief that you were sinned against. And here comes the radical line: there is nothing to forgive. That's not minimizing pain, it's exposing its source. Because pain without a cause cannot exist, and sin without reality has no consequences. The statement, "Father, forgive them for they know not what they do," in no way evaluates what they do. Jesus wasn't handing out pardons like a judge behind the bench. He was revealing that nothing had been done to God's Son. He saw beyond the nails, beyond the cross, beyond the nightmare. And that vision is what forgiveness really is. But the ego trembles at this. Because if there is nothing to forgive, then guilt has no job and fear has no reason to exist. And the ego runs on fear the way a car runs on gasoline. No fear, no movement. No guilt, no engine. That's why forgiveness feels impossible. Because the ego tells you the cost of letting go is too high. You'll lose your righteous anger. You'll lose your defense. You'll lose the story that makes you special in your suffering. And the ego whispers, if you forgive, they win. But what if there are no sides? What if there was no crime? What if you've been confessing in a courtroom that was always empty, to a judge who never sat down, about a body that never existed? Bodies cannot forgive, the Course says. Forgiveness lies in communication, not in flesh. And true communication is spirit reminding spirit that nothing has happened to disturb the wholeness of God. This is why forgiveness feels impossible. You're trying to do it as a body, with a bruised ego, holding on to evidence. But the spirit needs no evidence. It knows what is true, and it knows truth was never touched. That's why the Course calls forgiveness a privilege. Not a burden, not a chore, a privilege. It is the privilege of the forgiven to forgive. And who is forgiven? Everyone, already. Forgiveness is not something you give to get free. Forgiveness is the recognition that you were free all along. The only meaningful prayer, the Course says, is the prayer for forgiveness. Not because forgiveness changes reality, but because it corrects perception. It heals the split. It ends the nightmare. And once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes utterly meaningless. Why? Because what is there left to ask for when you realize you already have everything? Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. It doesn't fix the gap. It shows there never was one. So why does forgiveness feel impossible? Because you still think there's something real to forgive. Because you still think sin is a substance instead of an absence. But sin is nothing more than a lack of love. Darkness is lack of light, as sin is lack of love. And a lack can't attack. It can only be corrected by remembering. The ego's forgiveness is an empty gesture unless it entails correction. Miracle-minded forgiveness is only correction. And correction doesn't mean punishment. It means right seeing. It means lifting the veil and realizing you are still as God created you, holy, without sin, without pain, without suffering of any kind. Forgiveness removes only the untrue, lifting the shadow from the world. And what is left shines with innocence. That's why forgiveness is not impossible. It only feels that way when you try to drag the ego's baggage with you. But lay it down even for an instant, and the weight of centuries falls away. And you realize you were never forced to forgive. You were only forced to choose between chains that never bound you and a freedom that was always yours. And in that moment, forgiveness stops being an impossible task. It becomes the easiest thing in the world. Because nothing real has ever needed forgiving. And nothing unreal ever deserved it.